The girl voluntarily signed the contract of servitude. She then put on the shackles and stepped onto the stage of the auction. She had decided to sell herself. No matter the price, all she wanted was a place where she could survive. When Chise was very young, her father had abandoned her and her mother. In a moment of despair, her mother committed suicide in front of her. Later, the relatives who adopted her also gradually abandoned her. At this moment, she had lost all hope in life. All she wanted now was to have enough to eat and a place to live. The auctioneer announced the starting price for the girl, £50. In an instant, the bidders in the audience began raising their offers. At that moment, a tall man stepped onto the stage. He purchased the girl for an astonishing £5 million. The man then introduced himself as Elias. He told her that she was the legendary Slay Beggy, a rare magical constitution capable of drawing magical power from the surrounding environment and from herself. However, this would severely drain her body, and she was destined to die young. With a burst of light, countless thorns appeared around them. When Chise opened her eyes again, she found herself in a place that resembled paradise, a peaceful sanctuary far from the world she had known. This was Elias's home, the place where she would live from then on. Elias unlocked the chains that bound Chise and told her he was a thorn mage. From now on, Chise would live here as his apprentice. Elias prepared a bath for Chise and set out a delicious meal for her. This brought Chise a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Elias truly cared for Chise, treating her like family. He even gave her a magical stone, reminding her to always keep it with her. That night, Chise returned to her room. As she felt the comfort of the bed, she soon fell asleep. But in the middle of the night, she was woken up. The little fairies who lived nearby had come to visit her. They wanted to invite her to play in the forest. Chise hesitated for a moment, but then decided to follow the fairies. The forest at night was sparkling with lights, so beautiful. As they walked, they chatted, and without realizing it, they found themselves deep in the forest. Chise felt something was wrong and wanted to go back, but just then, the fairies revealed their true intention. They planned to take Chise to the fairy kingdom. The gateway to the fairy kingdom was right before them. Chise refused to go with them, wanting to return, but the fairies refused to let her leave and began to enchant her, telling her that she was always a homeless soul. Only in the fairy kingdom would she find true happiness. Chise's heart began to waver, and her consciousness started to blur, but she clung to herself, scratching her skin to stay awake. She wanted to go back to the home she had just gained, and there was only one reason. Elias was her family. At that moment, Elias suddenly appeared. The magical stone on Chise's body had guided him to this place.
ゼロ。今回は見逃してやる。次はサラマンダーの餌だ。
The fairies were terrified of Elias and quickly fled into a portal. As the fairies vanished, Elias swiftly picked up Chise, declaring he would marry her. The next day, after Chise had breakfast, Elias decided to take her on a honeymoon trip, but before that, he wanted to introduce a friend to her. As they walked down the street, Elias used magic to transform his skull head into the appearance of a handsome man. This was to avoid unnecessary trouble. He expected Chise to compliment him, but Chise found it quite strange. They then arrived at a shop, where the owner, Angelica, was also a thorn mage. She was a technician for a magical organization and an old friend of Elias. After a brief conversation, Angelica kicked Elias out. Then, Angelica began to teach Chise how to use magic. She explained that most magic in this world relied on the power of fairies and spirits to produce various magical effects. But since the power was borrowed, if the caster's ability was exceeded, there could be serious consequences. After explaining this, Angelica summoned her magical servant, the water spirit Hugo, and gave Chise a magic stone to practice with. She instructed Chise to try and transform the stone into something like a flower. So, Chise began to meditate, and the scene of her mother taking her to see a sea of flowers floated in her mind. The magic began to swirl around her. As the magic around her grew stronger, Elias suddenly appeared and stopped her. When Chise snapped back to reality, she found that the air around her was filled with magical flowers, formed from the magic stones. Angelica's face grew serious. It was clear that this had exceeded her expectations. At this point, Aryaso had no choice but to reveal Chise's true identity as a slave Begi. He had kept this a secret to protect her, because if her true identity were discovered, she would be in great danger. After learning the truth, Angelica began to work. With Hugo's assistance, the magical threads danced through the air. Soon, Angelica had created a set of magical tools for Chise. After a simple farewell, Chise left with Angelica. As soon as they reached the doorstep, they found someone waiting for them. It was Karamu, the priest from the nearby village. Chise had assumed that Karamu and Aryaso would have a bad relationship, but to her surprise, they seemed to get along very well. Karamu was there with a commission from the church. There were certain matters they couldn't handle, but Aryaso could easily resolve. Before Karamu left, Aryaso gave him a package. Chise was curious about what was inside the package. Karamu explained that the package contained medicinal herbs made with magic. After Karamu left, Aryaso told Chise that the villagers around here had all received Aryaso's kindness. As a thorn mage, Aryaso had already integrated into the lives of ordinary humans. His magic brought many conveniences to their daily lives. With that, Aryaso and Chise set off on their honeymoon trip, also to fulfill the church's commission. However, they hadn't gone far when they encountered a giant dragon descending from the sky. The dragon immediately grabbed Chise and lifted her into the air. On the dragon's back sat a man with golden hair. He told Chise that they were heading to the last land of the dragon race. After flying for what seemed like an eternity, they finally arrived at the Dragon Kingdom. This was the last home of the dragons. The evil dragons had long been expelled, and only kind-hearted dragons remained. The golden-haired man threw Chise down from the sky, and she landed in the water. She seemed to lose consciousness, slowly sinking to the bottom of the lake. It was only when she heard Aryaso's voice in her ears that she woke up, swimming toward the shore. But when she reached the shore, she found herself face to face with an elderly dragon. It seemed to have been immobile for a long time, its body covered in moss. At this moment, the golden-haired man approached. His name was Rindaru. He explained to Chise that he meant no harm. He simply wanted to see Aryaso's fiancée. As news of Aryaso's fiancée had recently spread like wildfire, Aryaso had actually arrived here long ago, hiding in Chise's shadow to protect her. Seeing that Rindaru had already noticed him, he emerged from Chise's shadow. Aryaso looked at the drenched Chise and immediately picked her up, using magic to dry her clothes. Rindaru, the caretaker of this land, though he appeared young, had actually known Aryaso for over 300 years. Rindaru and Aryaso had business to discuss, so they left Chise to play with the young dragons. However, Chise couldn't shake the feeling of concern for the elderly dragon. She walked over to it. The old dragon told her that it was close to death, and asked her to go play with the lively young dragons instead. The young dragons told Chise that the old dragon would soon turn into a great tree. Here, the large trees and boulders were all once old dragons that had passed away. Chise reached out and gently touched the old dragon's battered body, asking if it hurt. To the old dragon, it had lived far too long, and death might be a form of release. As time passed, all ancient things would eventually be replaced, and this old dragon was no exception. But it wasn't afraid. Dragons, unlike humans, lived every moment of their lives to the fullest, and they longed to return to nature after death. Chise couldn't help but reflect on her own past. In her painful memories, she was shunned by everyone. No one liked her. She was so lonely. Her life seemed like something not worth looking forward to. At one point, Chise had even thought about taking her own life. Just then, the old dragon spoke to her. Those who are alive should not envy those who are about to die. The old dragon's words broke Chise's train of thought. She was surprised that the old dragon could sense her memories. The old dragon apologized for this, but as compensation, and to help her understand the meaning of life, it decided to show Chise the sky. This would be the old dragon's last flight, and Chise's first time seeing the sky from this perspective. The old dragon took her, soaring through the sunset's glow, flying freely. When they returned to reality, the old dragon calmly awaited death's arrival. In its final moments, Chise stayed by its side. The old dragon's life came to an end, and in an instant, Its massive body transformed into a towering tree. Its last wish was for Chise to use a branch from its body to make a staff of her own. At this moment, Rindaru approached and told Chise not to be so sad, for this was the final fate of all dragons. After a dragon dies, its body returns to nature, becoming a home for other creatures. This, perhaps, is the gentlest and most meaningful death in the world. After returning from the dragon's territory, Chise fell into a deep sleep. It wasn't until the next morning that Elias woke her. At that moment, a talking cat appeared at the doorway. It casually jumped onto Chise's lap. Every cat here has 9 lives. As they age, they grow even wiser. Some of these cats have even formed a cat kingdom. This particular cat was there to welcome them on behalf of the king of the cat kingdom. The train soon reached its destination. They then walked on foot to a village. Cats were everywhere, although it was still a human village. Because of cat lovers and other circumstances, the cats in the village had gradually increased in number. Soon, they met the king of the cat kingdom, Molly. It turned out that Molly had commissioned Elias to help handle issues concerning her territory. At that moment, a little girl ran over. She asked Chise why she was standing at her door talking to herself. Chise had to explain. She said she had stopped because she found the cats in the girl's home so adorable. The girl was delighted to hear Chise praise her cats. She then told Molly she had to go home for dinner and ran back inside. Watching the girl's retreating figure, Molly's eyes were full of tenderness. She treated the little girl as if she were her own daughter. At that moment, Elias suddenly sensed a strange energy. He immediately went to investigate. Meanwhile, Molly led Chise into the forest. On the way, Molly began to recount past events. A long time ago, there was a human on this land who delighted in killing cats. No matter how well they hid, they would eventually be caught by this person. Later, under the leadership of the first Cat King, they joined forces and killed that human. However, the souls of that person and the cats he had killed were trapped here forever. Chise immediately noticed the swirling black mud in the lake. Molly explained that these were the impure, unpurified souls. They were on the verge of breaking free. Once they did, both humans and cats would be attacked. Suddenly, a mysterious figure appeared. He directly pushed Chise into the lake. Falling into the water, Chise felt as if a hand reached out before her. Then, she saw the story Molly had told. In this village, there was a loving couple. The wife, Mina, had been sickly since childhood, but Matthew never thought of abandoning her. When he heard that a magician had come to the village, he prepared to ask if there was a way to cure his wife's illness. The vision abruptly ended there. When Chise opened her eyes, she saw Mina from the story. Mina claimed to be the core of this mass of impure souls, and said that Matthew had ended up this way because of her. She begged Chise to help free them. When Chise woke again, she found herself in Elias's arms. Elias decided that they had to deal with this mass of impure souls immediately, but sealing it alone was not enough. What was needed now was purification. Although Chise had never used magic before, Elias believed she could do it. That evening, Elias prepared everything for Chise. He also had the wind spirit Ariel accompany her. Chise gathered her courage and walked toward the center of the lake. She worried that if she failed, Elias would be disappointed. At that moment, the mysterious man from earlier appeared again. He pressed a dagger against Chise's neck. Ariel was also held captive by another mysterious man. Elias immediately recognized him as Lindell. Seeing how much Elias cared for Chise, Lindell began to sow discord, but Chise didn't believe his words. In her heart, Elias had already become the person closest to her. Then, Chise seized the moment to break free from her restraints. She pushed Lindell aside and rescued Ariel. Elias immediately unleashed countless thorns, subduing Lindell in an instant. At that moment, the mass of impure souls began to stir again. Purification had to begin immediately. Molly decided to go in with Chise, because it was her duty as the Cat King. The moment Chise touched the mass of impure souls, she was instantly enveloped by it. In the blink of an eye, they were transported into the memories of those souls. They found themselves in a tavern. At that moment, Matthew walked in. He approached a magician named Raymond. Matthew asked if there was any way to cure his wife. Raymond said he first needed to examine her condition. Excited, Matthew immediately invited Raymond to his home. He didn't notice the sinister smile on Raymond's face. After examining Mina's body, Raymond told Matthew that her condition would only worsen, and she had at most a few years left to live. Matthew begged Raymond desperately to save his wife. This was exactly what Raymond had been waiting for. He then revealed a method to Matthew. Unknown to them, their entire conversation had been eavesdropped on by Mina's cat. From that moment, the number of mice in the village increased, and Mina's health gradually improved. One day, she prepared lunch to take to Matthew, who was working in the forest. On her way, she saw a small cabin and went inside, but as soon as she opened the door, she was shocked. Inside the cabin hung the bodies of cats. Matthew held a bottle of liquid made from the cats, claiming it was medicine to cure her. He told her that if she drank it, she would be healed immediately. Matthew explained that the legend of cats having 9 lives was true, so he used the cats' lives to make the potion. Mina couldn't believe that the kind Matthew could become so cruel. At that moment, Raymond entered the cabin. He restrained Mina and forced her mouth open. Then Matthew poured the potion into Mina's mouth. Mina writhed on the ground in pain, groaning. Matthew comforted her, saying she would be healed immediately. But then, Mina's body instantly turned into a puddle of black sludge. Matthew froze in shock. It turned out Raymond had only treated Mina as an experimental vessel for soul condensation. He didn't care at all about the horrifying consequences. Matthew refused to accept reality. He even thought that the number of cats killed was insufficient, so he prepared to hunt for more. Just as he stepped outside, he encountered the white cat his wife had once raised. When he tried to attack it, the white cat lunged and bit his throat, killing him instantly. In this way, Matthew was completely devoured by the village cats, and even his soul was trapped there forever. The souls of the cats Matthew had killed could not reincarnate and became entwined with Matthew's soul. Chise's eyes were already brimming with tears as she watched the story unfold. Then Mina appeared behind her. She hadn't wanted Chise to witness this, but Chise's spiritual sight was too strong. Mina hoped Chise could purify these souls, the souls of herself. Matthew and the cats were already tangled together, unable to leave. At that moment, Molly approached. She said she could use her last life to guide the souls, but Chise remembered that Molly still had to accompany the little girl. She didn't want Molly to risk her life for this. Then she thought of Ariel beside her. Chise asked Ariel if she could use the power of the wind to help. Ariel understood Chise's idea. The wind carries seeds to where they are meant to grow, a covenant between the land and the wind. So using the wind to guide souls to their resting place should also work. Ariel summoned the wind. Chise told Mina to imagine herself as a dandelion seed, letting the wind carry her. The seed would take root and grow wherever it landed. The wind would guide her to where she needed to go. Before Mina's eyes, a sea of blue flowers appeared. There, she finally reunited with her husband. The two embraced tightly. Afterward, Mina thanked Chise and completely disappeared into the wind.